Hello, everyone. We are here on Forward 2024. It's a pleasure to have so special guests coming from different parts of the world. So I'm Bruno Stefani. I'm the editorial board member of MIT Sloan Management Review. And the idea here is to discuss more about DeepTech. I think I have people that has a lot of experience. And I want to ask first to all of you present and talk a little bit about your life, your job. I know could be difficult, but it's a chat. So I will start with Ashlyn Carson from Greentown Labs. Thank you so much for coming to Brazil. We appreciate your time. Let's talk about your job and who are you?
Going deep to start.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. It is such a pleasure. So exciting to be here. And as you said, my name is Ashlyn Carlson. So I'm the Senior Vice President of Partnerships and Investor Programming at Greentown Labs. And Greentown Labs is the largest climate tech incubator in the world. So I'm based in Boston, which is the original location of Greentown Labs. We have a second location in Houston. And the incubator has existed since 2011. And in that time, we have grown to 150,000 square foot of physical space. And that space really is lab space. You know, we're not just a glorified WeWork. We truly have labs, prototyping lab, wet lab, machine shops, electronics labs, tool sheds. So all of the space and equipment that deep tech startups need to physically build their technologies. On top of the equipment and the space, we have so much programming to support these entrepreneurs who are typically pre-seed or seed when they join Greentown Labs. They usually stay with us for about 2.5 to 3 years. And when they graduate, they have typically raised a Series A. They're approaching, or they're thinking about demonstration scale. And when they're in Greentown, they have access to mentors, curriculum, support, and then the world that I oversee, which is corporate partnerships, investor programming, and accelerator programming. So we are really proud to have such an illustrious group of corporate partners, including Braskem. And the startups are looking to work often with these corporates because they're selling either to or through these corporates. And so one of the metrics for success from my role is how many corporate and startup partnership relationships do we facilitate? So, you know, I'm working day in, day out with corporates to help them identify the right kinds of technologies that can help them solve some of their challenges or opportunities, and equally working with the startups at Greentown to make sure we're connecting them with the right folks within these large corporates that can help them get their product into market and scale. That's a brief summary of Greentown and me. Yeah.
Amazing career. And coming from Europe, we have Martin Beloff from CanStars. Martin, tell a little bit more about your experience and your job on CanStars.
Yeah, thank you so much. Also, thanks for having me. It's fantastic to be in Brazil, to be in Sao Paulo, to be part of this conversation. We at CanStars are an initiative of top-tier companies in the chemical space, which is trying to help entrepreneurs succeed. We start at the very beginning, so we want to increase the number of total startups in the chemical space because we strongly believe that they have the potential to contribute to the sustainability transformation that this industry is in. And we go to universities, we try to speak with scientists, and we engage with them and try to help bring a let's call it startup spirit to the universities, because in Europe and in Germany in particular, it is not that common for a scientist in chemistry and biology and in chemical engineering to start a company. So in the very beginning, we try to inspire them. And once we've got them inspired, once they say, I really want to do this, I want to start a company, we support them all the way from pre-seed to Series A. So we run an accelerator-like program for startups in that specific space. For us, that means focusing on circularity, focusing on climate gas neutrality, focusing on companies that are in the space of safe and sustainable chemicals. And also because the chemical industry is one that's probably the least digitized in the world, and there's still a lot of work to do. We also work with startups in the digital space.
Perfect. And from Brazil, Vitor Moreira, the owner of the show today from Oxygia. And in my opinion, probably one of the companies that are doing a really good job in Brazil, especially on DeepTech and connecting with the startup ecosystem. Vitor, talk about a little bit more about your job and what you're doing and what you're expecting from this day and this podcast too.
Thanks, Bruno. Thanks, Aisling. Thanks, Martin, for coming all the way to Brazil and for our Forward event. So my name is Vitor Moreira, Managing Director of Oxygia. I oversee the investment practice. Oxygia is Brascom's corporate venture capital and corporate venture building arm. So the practice started roughly 2 years ago with a $150 million initiative from the parent company, with a main focus on sustainable investments as well as digital transformation startups, right? So very much in line with some of the topics Martin just mentioned. And these two sort of theses or themes that we explore within Oxygia are also very much related and in line with Brascom's sort of core pillars, strategic pillars, right? So when talking about sustainability, we're mainly looking into decarbonization technologies. We're looking into energy transition, material substitution, advanced recycling. So very much scientific and deep tech focused when thinking about sustainable investments. Whereas in digital transformation, we're mainly looking into more soft tech technology, agnostic regarding the tech per se, but maybe looking into IoT, computer vision, machine learning, AI, and whatnot. It's a global practice. So despite coming out of Brazil, we are looking geographic globally for investing. It's still early day for us. We're 2 years into the job. We've done 9 investments thus far, 3 of which in the US. So we're glad to be here, glad to have partners and folks such as Greentown Labs and ChemStars collaborating with us.
Great. And from my perspective, I think deep tech is the hot topic, especially in Brazil. But especially for you two, Ashley and Martin, it's not a new word. It's your job. It's what we are doing for a long time. How do you see new players, new startups that wanted to understand deep tech, wanted to build a new company, wanted to bring science to the market? How your perspective on the deep tech momentum?
Well, I mean, in our space, in particular, the chemical industry, we need hardware solutions. We need deep tech solutions. We live in a material world. Everything that's around us is physical. So we do need solutions, and Vitor just mentioned this, to replace existing materials, to become defossilized in the materials, to decarbonize the energy sector. And this simply won't work without hardware, without deep tech solutions. So we do see a lot of new companies popping up. We did see a lot of investment go into this space in 2021. It's come down a fair bit since then, but still compared to other parts of the industry or other parts of the VC industry landscape, climate is still holding up well, and deep tech is still holding up well, because ultimately I think the entire planet has understood that in order to deal with the implications that climate change poses, we need solutions. We need to act now.
Perfect.
I agree with everything that Martin said. And I think, at Greentown Labs, so we're focused on climate technologies broadly. And that means a lot of different kinds of companies come to Greentown. We think about climate tech along the 5 big greenhouse gas emitting sectors, and resiliency and adaptation, which is growing ever in importance. I would say 99% of our companies are hardware companies. There are a smattering of software-only plays, but most of them are hardware. And I think, to echo what Martin said, we saw such a frothy climate tech market in 2021 and 2022. That has certainly calmed down. I think there's been a bit of kind of waiting with bated breath to see what would happen in the United States vis-a-vis the election. And now there's continued waiting with bated breath to see what's going to happen once the Trump administration comes in. The impact we're seeing at Greentown, however, is that later stage climate technology companies have for a while been, I won't say struggling, but it's just been tougher to raise the capital that they need. We're now seeing that impact earlier stage companies as well. And so whilst there continues to be a lot of excitement and momentum around climate technology broadly, we were kind of looking for there to be either a big exit so that we can continue to build confidence that these are technologies that are going to have the financial return that the LPs and GPs need to evidence, and waiting to see what President-elect Trump is going to do vis-a-vis the Inflation Reduction Act, for example. Sure. But in the meantime, we're continuing to just go pedal to the metal with supporting our startups, and we continue to see a huge number of climate tech startups applying to Greentown Labs. So we haven't seen a slowdown yet in terms of the number of climate techs coming to market.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see. And when I consider in Brazil, Vitor, we know that you have a really good deep tech thesis. What do you think is the main challenges and opportunities to deep tech in Brazil? Because we have this geopolitical situation, you have capital flows from a country to another. So what do you think about your thesis on this scenario?
Right. I think when talking about challenges, we need to keep in mind where Brazil is in the midst of the global scenario, right? So it's still a developing country when compared to more advanced European countries or the US per se. And numbers speak to that, right? So when we think of pool of talent, right, Brazil has roughly 1,000 researchers per million inhabitants, whereas in the US and Europe, that's closer to 5,000 researchers. So 5x the amount of pool of talent, comparatively speaking. When we look at percentage of GDP spent into R&D, Brazil's closer is a little over 1%, whereas last I saw Germany was close to 3.1, whereas the US was 3.5% of GDP. So order of magnitude 3x that of Brazil, right? And that reflects into some of the challenges that we face here in Brazil, being the first one, I guess, the lack of funding, right? So, and funding is challenging for deep tech investing globally, generally speaking. But when you are a developing country, I think it's more challenging. So, we don't have the same sort of structures for grants as you have in other geographies. Of course, we do have grants, but not as spread out and not at the same volume as you have in other geographies. But it's not only limited to grants, right? If you look at private capital, so institutional investors, risk capital, VCs, or even corporate CVCs, that is still very limited available pool of capital for deep tech investing. So I guess that's the first main challenge. There are a few others. Access to infrastructure, for instance, is another. If you don't have access to lab space, it's hard for you to develop technology, right? So hence, again, a reflection of a lack of capital, but it doesn't stop at lab space, right? You need equipment for that. And with import taxes that are prohibitive, it's hard for you to have these importations. And not even to mention the effects difference that plays an important role for you to import equipment. And then raw materials as well, right? So you don't have the same availability of raw materials for scientific research as needed. There are some other structural issues related to patents, right? If you take the average time for you to get a patent registered, comparatively speaking, in Brazil, it's closer to 100 months. Whereas in last I saw,
Yeah.
100 months.
yeah, last
Different.
data I saw was for the US and Europe or Germany specifically, it was closer to 38 months. So from start to finish. So significant gap, again, for getting patents registered. And then I guess last challenge I'll put on the table is like an entrepreneurial mindset. So the last sort of challenge is the lack of entrepreneurial mindset, generally speaking, for researchers and scientists here in Brazil. I guess these people are very technically focused, and they don't have the aid of a university to provide them guidance or to provide them with the right processes for you to get started on a business direction, and not only from a technical standpoint, right? So all in all, those are very limiting and challenging factors for you to develop DeepTech. But then they also provide an interesting scenario for newcomers to sort of invest in and pick up those low-hanging fruits, right? And I guess that's where we as Oxysia and as a corporate venture capital practice try to benefit the most from this scenario. Not only because we can provide the capital, which is one of the main concerns, but it's smart money, right? We not only bring technical expertise from the parent company, but then we couple that with opening doors to a full network of partners, network of potential commercial relationships for potential startups, and a long-term horizon, right? So we understand that this takes time, and we're potentially the best partners to be with DeepTech startups for the long run, right? So I think that's a pretty good setup for a corporate venture capital practice in such a scenario.
Perfect. It's different, no? I think when you compare with US and Europe, we are seeing a different scenario in Brazil, but as I said, I think could be good in the long run, as Victor said. And Martin, when you see the situation, when you see the Brazilian scenario, and you compare with the past on CanStars, could you bring some examples of startups that you helped to launch? I think it's good to understand how you do that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the spectrum of companies we work with is quite broad, to be honest. So we also, just like Greentown, work primarily with hardware companies. Some of them have a hardware and software component, and we do have a few purely software companies as well. And one is a company called Ironcraft, and what they do is they make containers, packaging containers that are currently not recyclable. So in the food industry, in the cosmetics industry, but also in pharmaceuticals and chemicals, when you package something in a container, you want to make sure that, on the one hand, nothing gets inside the container to affect the quality of the product that you've packaged. And on the other hand, you don't want to make sure that nothing gets out of the container either, because that could, again, affect quality, but could also, in the case of chemicals or pharmaceuticals, be bad for the environment. And as of today, what's typically being used is so-called multi-layer packaging. So you have different types of packaging plastic. They're glued together, and you will never, ever be able to separate them again. So they're not really recyclable other than incineration, which isn't ideal, as we know. And Ironcraft has developed an ultra-thin plasma-based coating that enables you to use a monomaterial, coat the monomaterial, and have the same physical barrier that you would get when having a multi-layer packaging. And this makes a ton of containers that are currently not recyclable mechanically recyclable, which is incredible. And it's not just that, it's that when you try to package food or cosmetics, you often can't use recyclates because you don't know what the recyclate has been in touch with before. So it may contain some sort of toxins or organic solvent components, for example. And with the same technology, you can trap these toxins and make sure that the packaging made of recyclate can also be used in the food industry, for example, the cosmetics industry. And this is, to us, this is a huge game changer. They're now in the process of rolling out their first production facility. They have a bunch of customers lined up, all wanting this solution. And it's one of the teams that we value most because they're not just incredibly science smart, but they're also incredibly business smart too.
Amazing. Congrats. Really good story. Really good story. And I think when I see these cases and the DeepTech thesis on Esteja, I'm thinking about the entrepreneur right now that wanted to build a DeepTech startup. And I wanted to ask you, Aisling, what kind of advice could you give to the entrepreneur that wanted to build this company, that wanted to enter the sector, especially on the clean tech sector that I think is probably one of the most important for the humanity in the next years? What kind of advice could you give?
I guess, wow, I think that the overarching advice that I would give to specifically founders in the climate tech space is be really clear about why you're doing this, because it's a long and hard road. And this is not something where you're going to see, a return in the next couple of years. We're talking about probably 7-10 years working on this business, working on this product. And so it's lonely, and it is it's just incredibly challenging. So understanding what your motivation is, I think will help you stay the course. I think, if I was going to get more practical around the advice, I would look to find a community where you will find other founders, other entrepreneurs that you can lean on. Coincidentally, and this is not a plug for Greentown, but that actually is why Greentown started. It wasn't this big strategic vision. It was actually just 4 founders who spun out of MIT who were looking for cheap space where they could continue working on their businesses or their products. And they came together and they rented a garage in Cambridge. And it was only after the fact that they realized that there were synergies beyond saving money on rent. It was only after the fact that they were like, oh, wow, we can help each other with grant proposals. We can help each other with introductions to investors or share tools or whatnot. And so that kind of support system is really important. I think, there's also, the introductions, the connections, the market access that you get through being part of that kind of an ecosystem can just get you over the hump of some really challenging hurdles that otherwise are difficult.
And you have the examples, you have the cases. You see, okay, is it possible?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you want to compliment.
I was just going to say, it's from my perspective, what Greentown does and what we're aiming to do as well is to try to lower transaction costs, right? So whenever you make a decision as a founder, you need to spend time and effort to make that decision, to come up with a result. And having people around you who can help you make better decisions in less time, it's incredibly valuable, because as a founder, the one thing you don't have, besides capital maybe, is time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when
and I would add to that my 2 cents on some advice. Aisling mentioned about the community, which is quite important. I would say that typically researchers and scientists, they're very passionate about the technology per se, but they have a harder time looking abroad and thinking about applications, thinking about market potential, thinking about the business model that you're going to implement to use those applications. And that's not natural to them because that's not their background, right? So in our experience, the best way to try to solve that situation is bringing in co-founders with more of a business background. And that combination will potentially increase success chances for the startups, right? And I'll reiterate the point that Aisling made on resilience, right? At least in Brazil, the average before you get to commercial scale is 5 years. So she mentioned 7 to 10 years for success. For you to start getting some commercial traction, it's a 5-year journey, and then from there on forward. So it is a very, very long journey, and resilience is the name of the game.
Yeah, and I'm investing in some deep tech startups here in Brazil, and I agree with Victor that it's so difficult to bring scientists, professors, researchers to the market because they are so passionate about the research, the details, but they have a difficult to bring this research to the market, explain the go-to-market, explain the product, to have the business language. I don't know, in US, I think it's a little bit different, but do you agree? You have the same scenario, or as you enter the deep tech ecosystem, the climate tech ecosystem, it's different?
I think so. I agree with Vitor that it is true that most of the technical founders at Greentown and that I see more broadly are usually hugely complemented by having a commercial co-founder. And that is something that we also look for at Greentown Labs when we are evaluating startups that want to join our incubator. It's just a proven combination. I think the culture of entrepreneurism in the US is much more established and mature than pretty much anywhere else in the world. And so I think people tend to recognize that is a partnering or a combination that is likely to be more successful. And there are many more resources for entrepreneurs to draw on in order to get out of the lab and incorporate and make it into an accelerator or get introductions to investors, because the system has been set up to do that. It's not easy, but it is maybe easier where this is, deep tech is still emergent and climate tech is still emergent.
Perfect. And I have a question here to Vitor, but I wanted to bring for all of you, because I think it's really important that your thesis, your job contribute a lot to the society to solve the biggest problems that we have right now. How do you think that, Martin? How your job could help the innovation ecosystem and contribute to the biggest problems we have right now? Because, sorry to interrupt you, but we see in the last years a lot of digital startups, a lot of startups based on business model, but it's difficult to remember startups that wanted to solve climate change, poverty, and other topics. How do you see your job helping and contributing to these problems?
Yeah, I mean, most of the startups we work with, and most of the, or in a different way saying the same thing, most of the founders we work with, they are driven by the impact that their technology can have on the environment, on society as a whole. And I am in the lucky position that I can help these people become successful. I can kind of act as a guide when they, or a sparring partner when they have questions. I can connect them with the right people within organizations that then can help them. I can guide them to, or help them meet investors that will ultimately help fund these ideas and these technologies. So for me personally, I'm kind of like I feel like I'm kind of the good friend on the sideline trying to help that company. And I have a couple of founders that sometimes even call me on the weekend saying, listen, and there's one example, fantastic guy who's building a bio-based ingredient company, who's trying to replace fossil-based ingredients in cosmetics, for example. And he called me once saying, Martin, listen, I'm just calling. I feel like every time I call, I'm down and I don't have answers to specific questions. And that's why I call you. And I said, listen, it's okay. This is what I'm here for. But one day when you have great news, please also call me, right? So, but yeah, it's really, you're kind of becoming a startup's friend, so to speak, and you want to do anything in your power to help them succeed because you see these incredibly passionate people that want to change the world. And this is what kind of drew me to startups in the first place. So I went, I'm a biologist. I did a detour. I went into investment banking. I came across startups in investment banking, and I fell in love with the idea of people changing the world based on something that they had developed in a lab. And I joined a startup company after, started a company myself, and so on and so on. And a couple of years later, I'm the one trying to help as many of them to become successful.
But a follow-up question, and it's totally out of the script here. How can we identify this person, these people? Because we have people that wanted to become a billionaire, to build a unicorn, and I'm not saying that is different, but and we have, especially in Brazil, people that wanted to solve relevant problems. How do you identify? How do you see?
You figure this out by talking to the people, right? So whenever I talk to founders, it doesn't take long for me to realize, is this person in it for the money? Is this person in it for impact, right? So personally, I must say it's really about getting to know the founders. I wouldn't necessarily, this is probably a debate we can have. I don't know if it's a bad thing that you want to make money, right? So it isn't per se, right? So, and I don't have a problem with anyone making a lot of money if they contribute to the greater good and to society. So why should this be an issue? So it doesn't have to be one or the other. I think it best works when both of those come together, because if you're just in it for, let's say, social or environmental impact, and you kind of neglect the idea of making money, it's very difficult to find capital to fund these ideas, these technologies. So you do need to bring both of those perspectives to the table, and then you have a fantastic shot at actually realizing both impact and wealth.
Perfect.
I think just to add to that, I echo what you said, and I think you captured it really well there, Martin, is, at Greentown, most of the people self-select in. If you're coming to Greentown with a concept, these are people who are typically, they recognize that they're doing this because, they want to make a change in the world. And so we see that self-selection bias just by virtue of being part of our ecosystem. But I think, I really like what you were saying there, Martin, around the coupling of doing good and making a return, because it's something that we see, I think, being raised as, it's quite topical right now to talk about, especially in climate tech, we need to see the commercial returns. And one of the challenges, I think, with having that as your standalone rationale for why you should be, building a business, working on a specific technology, is that it completely eliminates the idea that there's a moral imperative to do it. And if you are going to stay the course as a founder with this 7 to 10 year horizon before you're potentially going to be successful, you kind of need to be motivated for reasons beyond making money, as Martin said, as well as making money, but there has to be a drive from within that, either deeply passionate about the technology itself, or you're deeply passionate about having impact in the world. It's a jungle out there. And so if you don't have the right motivation, it's going to be hard.
Yeah. What do you think, Vitor? Because in Brazil, we are so polarized in a lot of topics. And what do you think about this?
No, from Oxige's standpoint, you need both financial returns and the impact per se, which we measure through a strategic return to the parent company, right? So, of course, we are looking for technologies to solve a lot of this main sustainability issues worldwide. So single-use plastic, right? We're looking for technologies to solve that and substitute single-use plastic. But if the unit economics are not in place, if the returns are not there, we're not going to make the investment, right? We're not impact investors at the core, right? We are financial investors. And to Martin's point, right, as he was describing the startup that they collaborate with, monomaterial packaging is like holy grail, right? If you can instead of using 7 layers to package juice in a box, if you can have 1 layer and that is recyclable from the get-go, that's fantastic. But then your additives and your compatibilizers need to be cost efficient in order for you in order for the companies that are going to box it up to actually be able to pay for it. Or else, if the carton of milk or juice in the supermarket is 3x the price, the population is not going to be able to pay for it, right? So it boils down to being you need to be cost efficient and to have a financial return, right?
And maybe just one last remark. What's amazing to witness is when you speak with founders in the very beginning, like when they're still at university and they're just starting out, what they're trying to sell to investors but also customers is sustainability, supply chain security, then there's product or product performance, and then there's price. And as they go out and talk to customers, as they go out and talk to investors, this changes around. So all of a sudden they have to sell price, product, supply chain security, and sustainability. And for many companies now, and there's regulation in place, there's policies in place that ensure this, sustainability is a must, right? So you're not investing money anymore in a technology, in a solution that's not sustainable. So you may still be doing the old practice, but then you stick to this until there's something better coming up, but you're not going to invest in something new that's not sustainable.
Perfect. I love the conversation, and especially when the host is not necessary because the subject connects. But looking this scenario and trying to bring some perspectives, some predictions. Let's talk a little bit about the future, the trends, the next years, the next decades. Actually, what do you think it's the future of climate tech? What do you think is the next years? Because you're coming from a really good story. Greentown Labs is doing a really good job and probably one of the most successful players in this ecosystem. But what do you want to do in the next years? And what do you think it will happen in the next years?
So I think, one of the things that has been another hot topic of conversation, at least in the conferences and events that I've been attending, is the whole area of folk, getting to demonstration scale, and how do you unlock the capital required for demonstration scale? So when companies are hitting TRL, 7 or 8, and I think this is so nerdy, but one of the things that I'm excited about is the role that insurance is going to play in de-risking and ultimately allowing, debt, for example, to come in and finance some of these first-of-a-kind projects. So it's, I guess, I don't know if that's a prediction per se, but it's certainly something that I'm excited about in 2025, and I feel is really gaining momentum. Is how do you, people talk about the capital stack and how do you bring all the right players together, but specifically insurance.
Vitor, future predictions, crystal ball.
No, I'll speak a little bit about what for Brazil, I guess. We had a big win in the last couple of weeks with the regulatory framework for carbon credits in Brazil. So it's still early days, but different from other geographies where regulation plays a very important part in pushing for sustainable technology and investments. We are lagging behind, but those are the first baby steps along the way that make us think that we have a promising future in the very near term. So tailwinds on regulation are coming our way, and we want to be at the forefront in doing so. But apart from that, I think energy transition is still going to become, it has been a hot topic, but it's going to continue to be a hot topic as you have the requirement for providing energy for data centers, for electric cars and whatnot. So energy generation is not going to is not going to suffice to catch up for all the demand that's coming our way. So energy transition is going to continue to be a hot topic in that regard.
Perfect. And you, Martin?
Yeah, I kind of shy away from making predictions nowadays because I've been wrong so many times. Having that said, for the chemical industry and probably for all industries, it's easy sometimes to fall into the trap of looking just at the big organizations, big corporates. So the chemical industry in Germany is structured in a way that there's an incredible amount of small, medium-sized enterprises that, just like the big ones, need to change the way they manufacture stuff. And I think it's going to be more and more important for those companies, just like the big ones who do have open innovation activities already, to open up and to become versatile in working with startup companies, for example, to learn how to interact with startups that tend to be very, very different and to operate very, very differently to how the SME operates. So one of the things that I'd love to see, maybe I'd rather phrase it this way instead of saying it's a prediction, is to see small and medium-sized enterprise open up to startups and co-create the future of the chemical industry, because the big ones are already there. They have understood they won't be able to develop all the solutions by themselves in the time we have. But the small and medium-sized enterprises, they have big impact too, and it's easy to forget about this.
Perfect. So I'm loving this conversation, but I wanted to bring the final question, and I think this conversation, for the people who are listening, it's like a class. It's education piece. But probably all of you have some books, people, YouTube channel, podcasts, some networks. And I wanted to ask what kind of advice, recommendation you can have for the people who are listening to this podcast and wanted to learn more, to continue to learning with that all the information are coming from DeepTech, from science to market, from climate tech, from stars and chemistry. So could you bring some knowledge, some recommendations for the people?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I love podcasts. I go running a fair bit.
Sure.
So I typically listen to podcasts, and there's two I love. One being Zero, a Bloomberg podcast by Akshad Rati, who kind of looks into all different sorts of companies and also policies related to climate. And the second one is Climate Rising, which is a Harvard Business podcast. Both incredibly well researched, incredibly well prepared. And it's just, sometimes to me, it feels like I'm learning stuff but being entertained at the same time. So this is always a good combination. So I'd say those two podcasts, if you're interested in climate and hardware solutions for the future, listen to them.
Perfect. Ashley?
Similarly, I love podcasts, and I really love the My Climate Journey podcast. Oh. I also subscribe to a number of different newsletters, but I think Sightline CTVC is a great one.
CTVC.
Exactly, yeah. Started by Sophie Purdom, who actually is a former Greentown entrepreneur.
Oh, perfect. And you, Victor?
I was going to recommend My Climate Journey as well, but there's a recent study that came out, and again, specifically on Brazil, and I think it might be helpful for whoever's interested in the Brazilian ecosystem. It's called DeepTech Brazil 2024 by Emerge. It has a great outlook for where we're at, what are the challenges, which are the sort of the main companies in technology. So it's a very comprehensive study, which I think whoever is interested in deep tech should take a look at.
Perfect. So thank you so much. Really good conversation, really good insights. It's good to see all of you in Brazil. And I wanna to thank you, all of you, and thank you that are listening and or viewing us. Keep in touch for the next episodes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Thank you.